We're on Maasrot, Perek Gimel, Mishnah Dalet, fourth Mishnah in the third chapter of Maasrot. The Mishnayot now turn to the idea of when is a fruit considered hefker and when is it considered not hefker for the purposes of Maasrot. Because the rule is, if something is hefker, you're not chayav in Trumot and Maasrot. So in order to know, so if you find something, you have to know, is it hefker or is it not hefker? It belongs to somebody, and therefore it's chayav in Trumot and Maasrot. Says the Mishnah, Matzah ketzitzot baderech. Ketzitzot are the same as ketziot, dried te'inim, dried figs that were dried specifically in order for the purposes of putting them in a dveila. Remember, we're going to see a dveila in a second. It's the fig cake that they used to make. Okay, so says the Mishnah, if you found ketzitzot baderech, if you found ketzitzot, these dried figs on the road, afilu b'tzad tzedek ketzitzot, even if they're on the side of a field of ketzitzot, meaning there's somebody, the guy who is next to the guy who owns the field owns his ketzitzot. He spread them out to dry. Okay, and you found ketzitzot on the road next to the field. Similarly, let's say I have a fig tree, and the fig tree is leaning over onto the road, and obviously there are figs under it. You found figs under it. Mutarot mishum gezel uptirot mina maasrot. Mutarot mishum gezel means there's no gezel. Okay, they're mutar. Anybody can take them, and you're patur from maasrot. Ubezeitim becharuvim, but if you're talking about olives or charuvim, carobs, then chayavim, then you're chayav. So, if you found figs, you're patur. You're allowed to take them, it's hefker. But if you found zeitim and charuvim, olives or carobs, you're chayav in maasrot, i.e., you're not allowed to take them, they belong to the owner of the field, and you also, if you do, you'd have to take off Trumot and Maasrot, because they're not hefker. I bet you're wondering, what is the difference between te'inim, between figs, and zeitim and charuvim? It's a good question. Why in figs is it considered hefker, and zeitim and charuvim it's not considered hefker? So there's a Gemara, I'm quoting you, this is Baba Metzia, the Kahati pointed me to Baba Metzia, Daf Chaf Aleph Amud Bet. And the Gemara talks about the notion, asks this very same question. The Gemara is actually in the middle of an interesting discussion trying to prove between Abaye and Rava about whether Yi'ush Shalom Midat have a Yi'ush or not have a Yi'ush. Meaning if a person lost something but he didn't know he lost it, if he would know if he lost it, he would say, I don't care. But is that considered Yi'ush or not? So Rava says it is, whatever. So in the concept of the Gemara tries to bring our Mishnah, because our Mishnah is clearly a case of Yush Shalom Midat, or seemingly Yush Shalom Midat. The person wouldn't, his figs fell, but he doesn't know they fell. So the Gemara says, no. Even Reisha La'abaye, so what the Gemara says, I don't want to get into the whole thing, but it says, Te'ena Nami, a person, Meida Yadia Denatra. So a person knows if you have fig trees, a person knows that they've fallen, and therefore, he is miyayish, therefore it's not Yush Shalom Midat, it's Yush Midat. Elasefer l'Rava Kasha, diktani bezeitim ubecharuvim asur. Why is it asur? If it's zeitim and charuvim, okay, then why is it, if it's figs, why is it asur? If a person is miyayish, he knows and he leaves them there. Amar Rabbi Avahu shani zayit, hol v'chazuto mochiach ala. Figs, he's giving up, he doesn't want them, you can't prove that they're yours. Olives, somehow people understood that his olives look a certain way. Duchta de inash inashu. It's every person has his own way of looking at his figs. So his olives. They have a certain look. I'm not an olive guy. I don't really know, but I guess he knew what olives belonged to him. I guess his trees make a certain kind of olive. So if that's true, then how come you said figs are hefker? Why are olives not hefker? Figs are. When your figs fall to the ground, they fall once they're already ripe, and once they fall, they're nim'as, they become crushed. They're very soft fruit, and once they fall, they're disgusting. Nobody wants them, and that's the point of our Mishnah. The difference the Kahati says, the Gemara says, is why te'ena and ketzitzot? Because te'ena and ketzitzot, figs that fall on the ground are disgusting. So the Baal, the owner, is miya'ish. Miya'ish hefker, and for our purposes, not chayavin maasrot. Zeitim and charuvim chayavim mishum geza. Why? Because you've seen a carob when it falls onto the ground, it looks like a carob. Olives also, so the owner is not miya'ish, and therefore, since it belongs to an owner, you can't keep it, and you have to take off Trumot and Maasrot. The Mishnah continues, Matzah grogrot. If you found dried grogrot are dried figs, te'inim yibeshot, and they're already crushed. Remember the te'inim, they would let them dry. Once they dry them out, they would squish them. How would they squish them? People would step on them. So the Mishnah says, Im darsu ro b'nei adam chayav. Meaning, if most people in that area had already walked on their, or crushed or squished their figs, their dried, so already dry, chayav. That means that what happened was somebody already processed the fig and then lost it. So therefore it belongs to somebody. Ve'imla, but if most people haven't, then what happened was these figs fell off the tree and dried, and people walked on them, step on them, and therefore patur because it's hefker. Matzah pilchei dveila. If you found a pie slice of the cake, of the dveila, the dried fig cake, chayav. Then obviously it's chayav. If you walk around the street and you found a piece of igulei dveila in the street, it's chayav in Maasrot, and obviously belongs to somebody. Shi'adu Hashem davar gamur, because it's known that it came from something that was already processed. Last piece, v'acharuvin, regarding carobs, ad shelo knasan the Rosh Hagag, until you put them up into the Rosh Hagag. The Rosh Hagag, let's get the Bartunur for a second, okay? Until you brought them to the Rosh Hagag, lasot be'em arima, they would put them in a pile, shehu garnam shel charuvin lema'aser. We learn that when you're done with your carobs, they had a place on the roof. They obviously open air was beneficial. They would leave them air to dry. Okay, and that's if they would leave them. So until you brought them to the Rosh Hagag, back to the Mishnah, ad shelo gnasan the Rosh Hagag, until if they're lying around the field, until you put them in their final storage, and then the chayav in maaser, morid them lebehema patur. You can let your animals eat them, and your patur. You don't have to take trumot and maasrot. Why? Because whatever the animal doesn't eat, you're going to bring back. I.e., it's not considered fully processed yet. Says the Bartunura, Moridem behema. You can let your animal eat, aval hu lo yochal. You can't eat them. Why? She'en ochlim ala muktzeh ela bimkoman. The only time, we've seen this in previous Mishnah as well, the only time you can eat something that is in the muktzeh is at its place. When, even though it's still processed, it's the nagamar melacha, it's in the muktzeh, it's in the drying out area, you can only eat it in the drying area. Klomar, meaning, haperot sheshotchinotam b'yaveh shelo nigmar melachtam, en ochlim em ela bimkoman. The fruits, okay, that you spread out to dry, you can only eat in that place. The shalobim koman, but if it's not in that place, if it's not in their drying place, people can't tell that you're eating and you're not taking off trumot and maasrot because it's not nigmar melachto. But if you're feeding your animal, then even shalobim koman, because your animal, it's very clear that it's not gmar melacha. Okay, and why? Because because you're bringing back the extra, the makom, because you're bringing it back to the place where they dry out. Anytime you're going to bring it back, the extra you're returning to the muktzeh, lo tavil, it doesn't have a din of tavel. So everybody remember that when you're processing your carob plants, that if you're taking them from the muktzeh, you want to give to your animal, you don't have to first take off trumot and maasrot. Stop here. artspotter@gmail.com for comments and questions, and we'll dedicate the learning to the memory of my father, Rav Simcha ben Yitzchak Kalman. Have a good day.